There you go. Hello, and thank you for joining us for Crucial Conversations on Cognitive Diversity, brought to you by Bridges 2E Media and the 2E Centre for Research and Professional Development. My name is Maria Kennedy, and I have the pleasure of being your host. Thank you for joining our conversation and sharing your thoughts and questions and completing the welcome poll. We really cannot do this without you. I also want to say a special thank you to the team behind the scenes. JT, John, and Stephanie, thank you for all your patience, hard work, and expertise. Trust me, without you, this webcast wouldn't happen. My guest today is going to talk to us about navigating life while being neurodiverse. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Jaxon Kramer. Hi, Jaxon.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've already completed a full day of work. And
just a little bit.
Yeah, and you're on a different time zone, so we really do appreciate you staying up to talk to us.
My pleasure.
So I know it's not easy to be an amazing human, especially when you're neurodiverse and a trailblazer. So can you tell us about your early years? How did you feel about yourself in elementary and middle school?
That's a big question. I guess a little background about myself. At that time, I grew up with Tourette's, somewhat of a significant case of Tourette's. My father had it. I was diagnosed when I was 6. And I think for me, I can only speak for myself really, but growing up with Tourette, nothing made sense. You know, I felt like, you know, when you're a kid, everything is black or white. You know, if I can't control my own body, then, you know, I didn't understand, you know, I felt a bit broken, to be quite honest. I see, you know, I can't stop moving no matter how much I want. You know, I felt like, yeah, like a guest almost. So it was tough growing up. It was really, really tough, especially, you know, not much was really out there about Tourette's either. So yeah, it was tough. I was angry at everything. I was angry at the world. I was angry at, you know, this table for being a table. I just nothing made sense, you know? So yeah, just confused and angry, really, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that really must have been quite terrible. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that there's that much more out there in the world about Tourette's either. I mean, I know that that we have students at our school that obviously have the syndrome, but I don't hear much conversation about it. I know people talk an awful lot about being on the autism spectrum, about having ADHD, but there are other conditions that people have that, I don't know, did they get sidelined? Did they just get ignored? Or do we just assume that children with those conditions are badly behaved? Because I know for a lot of children that's what happens to them.
Absolutely, yeah, kind of dubbed challenging behavior, right? It's easy to call it challenging behavior, really. But I think for me, especially I think with Tourette's, is when you see it portrayed on media, in the media, you actually are not seeing Tourette's, you're seeing something called coprolalia, which is the kind of screaming of words, of epithets, usually bad words. And that's less than 10% of cases, you know. And I think it's similar when you see autism, for example, portrayed in the media, you see Rain Man, or you see you know, you see those types of very, you know, niche presentations, which isn't reflective of the whole spectrum or the whole condition. I mean, for me, I mean, I was lucky enough to be in that 10% of people with coprolalia, but I think there is more out there if you know where to look, I think. But it's interesting that you say that, because, you know, here in the UK, at least, the prevalence rates for kids with tic disorders and autism are very similar. So it's not like, autism is much more common than, tic disorders or Tourette's in children here, at least in the UK. So I don't know. I think, I think one of the big things for me when I was growing up was my parents, especially, they were very proactive. And they really instilled in me this kind of belief that I needed to be an advocate because, I needed to make my condition known. And I think that was a really big thing for me because one, I definitely certainly did not want to do that. But two, anxiety, at least for Tourette syndrome, is like public enemy number one. It's the worst thing for Tourette's and tic disorders in general. And I think a lot of the triggers that make it worse come from social situations. And where do we learn how to socialize, more than school? So removing that variable from your surroundings really, I think, at least for me, helped. Didn't make childhood incredibly more pleasant, but, I can see in hindsight that it was beneficial. Yeah.
Most definitely. What was it like growing up with a parent who also had Tourette's?
It's funny because my dad didn't know he had Tourette's until I was diagnosed. He just thought it was a bit funny, I don't know. To this day, I ask him and he says, I just didn't really know what it was. And I kind of thought, I would have been really concerned about, like if that were me, I would have been really concerned. What happened was when I was about 6, my mom was walking me into preschool. I don't remember this, but she said that I looked up at her and I said, Mom, my body does things my mind doesn't want it to do. And so she said, better take him to the doctor, So,
nice.
And then, myself, my older brother, and my dad were diagnosed. My younger brother, A-okay.
Well, you're A-okay. That's the point. He's just different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, he just, he's just has more hair as well. It's a curse. It's a curse. Out. Or I wasn't met with that kind of strict resistance to that, behavior. And I remember that was very off-putting, and no matter what, I felt like, there was a willingness. If I was willing to explain myself, then there was someone there willing to hear it. And I had never really, other than my family and the people that I was brought to talk to, academically or in school settings, that was novel for me. That was completely novel. And I think some of the staff are still there at Bridges. They'll tell you, I pushed back, I pushed back for sure, and I think that, there was this, right off the bat, there was this acceptance that you are different. They didn't expect. I think the difference was when I was in other schools, I was like a triangle peg that they were trying to force down a square kind of, hole. It just doesn't work like that. And Bridges really gave that, that open and explorative approach, seeing kind of, okay, so what works, Yeah, and I think that made all the difference for me, Yeah.
So being accepted definitely made the difference, and being more open to who you were makes a real impact. So are there some teachers that you have real fond memories of because of the way they interacted with you?
Yeah. So Sherry Minkowski, there was a teacher named Peter Guttmacher, Kari, we both know Kari,
We do, and we love
Yeah,
Kari. She's
we do.
amazing.
The most wonderful soul. And, I think that in itself is proof of kind of Bridges the impact Bridges had on me is that I don't want to say how many years it's been since I was at Bridges, but the fact that I'm still in touch with those teachers that I've just named. I mean, Sally Ann, I remember I was really, ironically, a large part of my job now is doing statistics. I remember in high school, in Bridges, I had a teacher named Sally Ann Rosenberg, and I was struggling with statistics. And she kind of sat down with me, and then she said, let's gamble. And I learned so much through roulette, and that's when I formed my gambling addiction. No, I'm kidding. But it's that out, I think the thing is that in Bridges, we were all it was so small and everyone was so different that it felt like, we were, all misfit toys before, we felt like, it was the island of misfit toys and we kind of embraced the weird, you know what I mean? Like, we were all different and we were all unique. And the big part of it, for me at least, was struggling so much to, match this perceived idea of what normal was, which was nothing. Normal for me was just nothing, and I think that's one of the things about Bridges, first school I ever went to where we were called the teachers by their first name. It was relatable. It was, it was welcoming.
I like that. Yes, it was welcoming. I love that. Most definitely. I know Bridges definitely strives to be all encompassing and a place where people get to be themselves. And I think one of the things that has always bothered me is the use of the word normal, because I mean, what's normal? Yeah. I don't make the definition of normal, so maybe I don't like it because obviously I'm not normal. But normal for me is just so limiting, because it requires very, very strict, very, very narrow, closed parameters, which most of us, if you think about it, don't actually fit into. So I definitely prefer the notion of being yourself and finding out who yourself is, because, if we take the time to find out who we really are and celebrate our strengths, which is what Bridges is known for, you discover these amazing people like you who then go on to do amazing things. So, like I said, I know the journey has been difficult, but from Bridges, so then you've got this new lease of life and who you are. What did you do next? Where did you go from Bridges?
Well, from Bridges, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico for film video school. So I started out in a career in TV and movies. And then eventually, there's only so much horrible television that you could put out into the world until you feel it's your responsibility to repair the damage that you've done. I began that career. I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I didn't end up completing that degree. And because, there was an illness in my family and I moved back, and I also, struggled with addiction. That's, at the end of high school, that's also how I learned to cope, and it gave me some false sense of belonging, everyone goes around the circle and smokes the joint together. I felt like I belonged, but no one really knew where they were. You know what I mean? No one knew who was in that circle. No one knew anyone, but that's how I learned to cope, because if I did that, I didn't feel, or I didn't tick as much, and I didn't feel like I was standing out like a sore thumb. But eventually I found sobriety, and that was really what led me to kind of my real journey of self-discovery, because I was able to kind of really come to a point to where I thought, this is not sustainable. You know, I don't have any gas left in the tank to keep running and fighting and, you know, avoiding. And when that happened, I actually realized TV and movies wasn't actually what I thought my calling was. And I went back to school and got a license in chemical dependency counseling. So that's really what the journey was from Bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, short and sweet.
So, identified your own dependency and then learned how to help other people. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's really phenomenal. I have a question that might butt onto the end of that. So it's, how did you learn to accept your challenges? As my son is 13 and is a struggle to feel comfortable with it. It's hard to feel comfortable in your skin. And you said that you really didn't feel comfortable in your skin. But outside of the chemical dependency, was there anything else that helped you or has helped you since then, maybe?
Yeah, it's that I think once I stopped lying to myself and saying that I'm supposed to always feel comfortable in my skin, I then started to accept and be okay with the fact that I'm human. My mind is tricky. We are human beings who are inherently flawed, born into a flawed world that we were never asked to be born into, and we're just trying to figure it out, you know? And once I'm able to accept that, actually being, you know, uncomfortable in my own skin is a normal human experience, you know? And I think I didn't really get that until later, because I think when I was younger, there was this real focus on, yes, but look at the brighter things, or you know, look at all your strengths, you know. But at the same time, you know, there were limitations, and acknowledging that, but not, you know, discounting that, because I think that's really what helped me was acceptance of being uncomfortable doesn't mean that we're saying that's, you know, the things that we feel are wrong are okay. It's just accepting the struggle and leaning into the struggle and developing a different relationship with that discomfort. You know, what does that discomfort feel like for you? You know, for me, that discomfort felt like, you know, just I wanted to not be seen for too long, or else I'd be figured out. You know, so I would, you know, go from group to group, or from, you know, this to that, and red hair to blue hair to no hair, you know. And I think if I were to give a word of advice for the 13-year-old, I would say, you know, as much as you wish to be different, you know, you're human, and the chances are that the people who you're comparing yourself to are going to be struggling with something as well. It's almost, I'm very confident that that's a, you know, a high likelihood, and that, you know, we're all human and we're all doing our best, and, you know, emotions are not permanent. You know, there's this exercise that I do with clients that I work with from acceptance and commitment therapy, where it's very easy to apply labels to ourselves, especially in the gifted community. I mean, we're given labels all the time. You know, just because I have Tourette Syndrome or ADHD doesn't mean that I am ADHD or am Tourette Syndrome. And there's this exercise we talk about, kind of, you know, looking at the self as context, you know, and taking a step back and observing kind of all of these things we use to describe ourselves, and we fuse with these kind of labels that we have. You know, if I'm feeling sad, I say, you know, I would say, I'm a horrible person, right? And, so what I do with the kids, I actually have some Post-it notes. So we'll write these labels that we label ourselves with, and we put them on each of us, right? So I'll write some for myself, they'll write some for them. And what we do is we go, okay, so when you look at me, what do you see? I see all of the Post-it notes. Okay, but what happens if we take the Post-it notes off? I'm still there, so when we fuse with these labels, it's easy to believe that that's who we are when really they're just descriptors,
I like that. I like that. So I must spend some more time with my Post-it notes.
Or it's like the sky and weather, right? The sky is always, it's usually blue, but there's always weather, right? There could be a dark cloud, there could be a blizzard, there could be rain, but eventually that will pass, and behind that is always the sky. And if we're the sky, all of these emotions and difficult thoughts and experiences and memories that we're dwelling on, that doesn't define us. It's just something that kind of gives us context.
I like it. So it gives us context for now. The questions are coming in fast and furious.
All right.
So one of them was, did peers tease you, or did you lack no motivation due to the constant challenges? My son feels like he is always trying so hard and nothing works. And as a result, he does not want to identify with his disability, as it is invisible but true to him and can be embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it's so tough to have to say that, I think usually, and I get what her child is saying, you don't want to identify it because it's not something that you want. It's a constant struggle. It's really difficult. It's tiring. It's exhausting. And physically you can't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not unseen either, because it's very noticeable. And yes, I was teased by peers. I mean, I remember when I was young, my parents would have me give at the beginning of a new school year in elementary school, I would stand up and give a very short, brief summary of what Tourette's is. I have Tourette's, and this is what Tourette's is. And I think, it included that sometimes I'll pick up new tics from things that other kids with Tourette's do. So I remembered, I had this tic where I tapped on the table, and other kids were then laughing and then trying to get me to develop, ridiculous gestures and tics. And I mean, without knowing him and without knowing his school, I wish I could offer more of a solution to him. But what I can say is that, separate Tourette's from you. So, I am Jaxon and I have Tourette's. Who is Jaxon? And who is Tourette's? And what is Tourette's? Right? And I think that, I'm finding myself wanting to give this magical thing to say for this child. It's so difficult. Sometimes for me, I think sometimes the most helpful advice is saying, the unfortunate truth is things will be difficult. That's the unfortunate truth. And it's really tough to say that, and I can only imagine as a parent to have to, listen to this and say, I have to tell my kid it's going to be tough. Yes, it's going to be tough, but that doesn't mean that they're alone. And that doesn't mean it will be like this forever. Choose your friends wisely. There will always be someone there who's understanding if we look, And when we see, I remember thinking, I just want to be friends with those kids. Mm-hmm. Now that I remember, those kids were kind of assholes. And then I thought, then thinking about that, part of my language, oh yeah, this is recorded. I guess the kids that you want to be friends with, why do you want to be friends with them? You know, what are those qualities that you like in them, that you kind of vibe with? You know, if you can't answer that, then look for a new person to sit at lunch with, or, you know, I wish I had better advice for you. I'm sorry.
I think that's brilliant. I really like that concept of why do you want to be friends with these people, you know, and if you cannot answer that, then obviously you don't really want to be friends with these people. And you're right. I mean, growing up and going to school, you know, I went to a school where nobody looked like me and life was tough, and one of my escapades. So, but I did find a friend who didn't care. And so she and I were buddies, you know, and it was her that helped me through that experience. So I think you're spot on. It's looking for people who are prepared to get to know you without that judgment, and without being stressed out by the fact that you aren't exactly the same as everybody else. So yeah, one of our attendees says, we often say, look at yourself as a zebra, born of many stripes. And even though you have a disability, it is only one stripe, but it does not define you as a whole being. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. It was from an anonymous, but I think that parries exactly with what you said, you know, about your learning difference being not who you are. So there is so much more to you. So that's kind of cool. So you had a really successful film career and then decided, well, you did. You were making, come on, that's the LA dream. You were making TV and surviving. You weren't waiting tables, or what's it? Resting, we say in the UK. Yeah, so we say resting when you're not working in your area. So so I love the fact that then you overcame your addiction and then went on to help other people. And then you left the country. I mean, now normally people leave, well, I shouldn't say normally because I didn't. Often people leave because they're running away from something. They're escaping from life not being good. But you didn't do that. Like I said, you had that successful career. You also had the practice where you were helping people get over their addiction. So you were really doing well. So what prompted the move?
It's interesting you say that, because that was the first time I ever made a move where I was leaving a very full life behind. You know, I wasn't leaving or running, as you said. That was the first time in my life. And well, one of the reasons was, you know, I really like the way education is set up here. I really like the way that mental health treatment is provided in the NHS. So for all the Americans out there, that's the national healthcare system. It's essentially what America should adopt, but that's just my opinion. And my younger brother lived in London, and I came to visit, and I looked around, I saw the school, and I thought, yeah, I'd like to do that. Also, you know, tuition for undergraduate degrees capped. No matter if you go to Oxford or where I went to Goldsmiths, it's capped at a certain amount. You know, and so financially less restrictive. You know, and even as, you know, someone who's moving, and I could see, you know, a real, I guess now you know, by the time I finished doctorate, it would be a 10-year plan, you know, so yeah, I saw that here. And so that's what I came to do. So I moved to London. I did my undergrad at Goldsmiths, which I absolutely adored. I loved Goldsmiths will forever have like one of the most precious spots in my heart. I mean, they are very similar to Bridges. There was never a closed door, and I have personal, relationships with kind of the lecturers that I had that made such an impact on my life. I still talk with them frequently, and always an open door, and like Dr. Alice Jones there and Professor Pamela Heaton, they were just amazing people. And I found some really great friends there as well, so, and then after that, I did a master's at University of Bath. And after that, gosh, I've been studying forever. Academia is good. And then I went back to London, and then I worked at an IAPT, so that's improving access to psychological therapy. So essentially, those services are set up to kind of provide, primary care therapy. So people who often kind of presented with like depression or social anxiety or trauma, OCD and anxiety kind of difficulties, and then they kind of, I was able to get onto this training program through them. And I then trained and did a postgraduate diploma in high intensity cognitive behavioral therapy. And after that, I'm now here in sunny Wales.
Or not so sunny Wales.
Yeah. And I'm learning a lot, and this doctorate has taught me a lot, and it's been really difficult. I've had my struggles, I went through med changes since I've been here, talking about struggles with neurodiversity. Some really difficult to change, some, working, and yeah. So that's, in a nutshell, been my journey from Los Angeles to London and all over the UK.
That's awesome. So I know we have parents who are with us, and I know for parents who I've spoken to, allowing their child to branch out, to leave from home and the safety of the home environment and go to a school or university so far away. I mean, how did your parents deal with that? Were they supportive? And can you give any advice to parents who are thinking of, or whose children are looking forward or wanting to go to school in a different state, go to school in a different country?
Yeah, absolutely. How they dealt with it? No clue. No clue. They were supportive for sure. I think when it comes down to it, clearly we'll have our own needs and our own, that will, need to be supported by others. But really what's, I think, important is for the child to understand the needs that they can provide for themselves. Mm-hmm. And because, as tough as it is of a pill to swallow, I'm not a parent, but I'll say, as adults or as parents, you won't always be there. So these are experiences actually that are going to teach them skill building. There is an element to where we need to allow kids to struggle to some extent. They need to be able to, those struggles are learning experiences. We learn the dynamics of how to engage and interact and to make sure our needs are met by asking, when, from infancy, if the baby's crying, they cry to send that message. But, as we grow older, the problems become more complex, the needs become more vague and difficult meet. And the kids are the experts of their own experience. They might not understand exactly why they feel or experience the way they do, but they are experts on how it feels when they engage with the world and when they engage with their surroundings. So as a parent, you know, understandably, you don't want your baby to suffer. Well, who would, you know? And I guess having a really open and honest conversation, because if they're going to leave the nest, then they're adults. They are adults who are also neurodiverse. And I think having a conversation about, okay, so you're going to go to university in Santa Fe, New Mexico. What is that going to look like day to day? So you're getting, you know, do you need support academically? Okay, let's get the paperwork ready. And I assume the diagnoses prepared to email over to the support team at the university. As far as kind of socially, do you think you need help? You know, what do you think? What can you do for yourself? What do you anticipate will be difficult for you? Yeah.
I love that. I love that, because as a parent, we often forget that our children do have an opinion. And I loved what you said, kids are the experts of their own experience. I've written that down. I'm going to steal it, just so as you know.
We're all experts of our own experience.
Right. But I think, though, as a parent, we often forget, because we're trying so hard to protect our children, to shelter them from people who make their lives miserable. I think we often forget that our children do have a say, and like you say, are adults and are ready to go out there. And the world is going to be challenging. We cannot protect them from everything. And so I think it's just wonderful that you're reminding us to allow our children to go out there, to really talk to them, to value what they have to say, and then support them in being able to have those experiences. Because if we don't have them, then what can we talk about when we're old? Nothing, right?
Absolutely.
We have nothing. Okay, so I've got a few more questions that have come in. So one of them is, have you worked with kids transitioning from middle to high school and independence?
Transitioning from middle to high school, yes. And what exactly is?
And then independent. So I guess from high school on into the world.
Oh, and on into the world, yes. So middle school to high school, that's a toughie. That's a tough one, because that is a major developmental period right there, you know. Especially kids with Tourette, puberty is the worst time, you know.
Yeah.
So usually I'll tell parents, but with, you know, kids who are just about to hit the puberty stage, I say, you know, unfortunately, it's probably going to get a little worse than, you know, or a lot worse before it gets better. I think, you know, the real thing is we can worry and worry and worry about what is to come and the potential, you know, catastrophic scenarios that could happen. And there's an element to where it's understandable why a lot of people worry. And because when we worry and worry, it also plays a function. We're conscious of all of these red flags that, you know, we can try to potentially avoid. But it also, if we're thinking about the future and all of these potential catastrophic scenarios, we're not present. So I guess thinking about that transition is, what are the problems that you can actually, you know, I guess when I work with the kids who are worrying a lot, I say, okay, so let's look at worry in two different ways. There's hypothetical worry, and then there's practical worry. So what ifs, or maybe, you know, and then worrying that I didn't do well on that test, right? So a lot of the time it's a hypothetical worry. What if, this could happen in the future if I don't get my child to do this. And usually what I do with the kids is there's this saying that I learned is, think about your worry. Is there something you can do now about that worry? If you can, make a plan. If no, let it go. Which is easy, which is honestly easier said than done. I definitely, I get that. But I guess, there's a such thing as too much attention to the difficult. So like, I guess when I was younger, I remember that focus being on the struggle and on the difficulty. There was a hyper focus on new psychotherapist, new doctor, new this. And I think to some extent, it might be helpful for the parent to say, I'm here for you no matter what. I will go to bat for you. You're my child. I will go to, beyond and farther for you. But in order to do that, I need to know what you need. So if you ever need support in any way, you let me know. And if I can do it, I will, because I'm your parent and I love you. And I think that fosters, this also, there's a support, but not like a pressure to utilize that support, right? And it also tells the child to be mindful, conscious of the struggle and what they may need help with. Because for me, for so long, saying I needed help meant just a confirmation that I was flawed. Yeah. And that was just, I think, one of the most inhibiting, things for me, was that I wasn't able to say that I needed help. I would cry and I'd break down, and that was the sign of the struggle. But openly saying I need help was not something that I was able to do, because I felt like, yeah.
Oh boy, yes, most definitely. So one of our attendees says, my 18-year-old kid struggles with maintaining relationships. They are very sensitive and have a hard time moving past insensitive comments, etc. Have you seen this with other neurodiverse kids, and any thoughts about it?
I think I've seen this with kids.
Yeah.
I even as an adult now, before this, I felt this nervousness, and this was when everybody had that really lovely wait music and the screen of us both. And I remember saying, whoa, I'm like, what is that? Right. I felt it physically. So I checked in and then I really kind of thought, man, I really want to be liked. I want to come off as a relatable and likable dude. I want to say some miraculous stuff that is like so mind-blowing, and I want to be seen as a revelation, right? And I thought, wow, that's interesting, right? So I guess the sensitivity is, no matter who you are, we all just want to be loved and accepted. And the insensitivity, goes against that need or want to be loved and accepted. And that's understandable. I guess I would tell the child that the people who are being insensitive, or those insensitive comments, it's very likely that they're saying that because they feel a need to be loved and accepted. And it could be that they've interpreted that someone else doesn't like them. For example, if I'm socially anxious, I'm really nervous people are going to see me tic, I'm going to look down, or I would put my hair over my face. And if I'm doing this and I'm talking to you, what vibe do you pick up from me, Maria?
That you don't like me.
Yeah, I'm aloof or cold or something, when in reality, I'm so petrified that you're going to see me tic and not like me. And then you come back and say, oh, I don't want see Jaxon anymore? That's cold and aloof, bald and big-nosed, you know, which I am. That's an acceptance right there. But I guess thinking about, okay, is our side of the street clean, and thinking about someone else is probably struggling too.
Right.
Why do you think so? Explore that. So you really, you're very sensitive, and that's a good thing. But you are you, and at times you could be sensitive. Are you always hypersensitive? Maybe not. So does that mean you're a hypersensitive person? Some of the time, maybe. I am Jaxon, I'm sensitive some of the time. Jaxon, I want to be loved and accepted. And not everyone's going to like me. That's okay. And yeah, I guess, be careful with how you define yourself. I'm a highly sensitive person sometimes, or when I want to be liked, I could be more sensitive. Yeah.
I like that. So it's define when that happens. So take ownership. We're almost out of time, Jaxon. I don't understand where the time disappeared to. It's just been so wonderful talking to you. I'm going to squeeze one more question in. It says, my kid is barely able to walk to school. How did you work up to independence, and how you work towards the independence and getting ready for university? I don't know how old her child is.
It's tough because, I could answer that, and my answer would also not exactly be a solution, or, for me, to be quite honest, I don't think I was prepared to go to university. I struggled. And when I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, I came back after a semester. I didn't stay there for very long. And part of it was because, my mother fell ill, but also I wasn't functioning academically. I needed support that I didn't get. And, at that time I wasn't ready, but I think, it's understandable, again, to worry about whether your child will be able to get to university. And but if you look at my experience, I didn't have a bachelor's degree until I was 25. If you think about it, I never completed a bachelor's until I moved to London. I did certification, licensing, education, but not a full bachelor's degree. And there's no right time frame.
Okay.
And I think that's the point with us people, who are neurodiverse, is we don't have to go to university at 18, because we don't have to fit ourselves to the way the world expects the norm to be. So I guess my advice to you would be, if your child is struggling to walk to school, it's amazing that he is walking to school, and I guess focus on getting those steps more fluid, one step at a time, and I guess reach out for help. So, I mean, if he's or she is or they, or however they identify as someone with a tic disorder, reach out to the Tourette Association of America. You'll find support groups, peer-led support groups, professionals that are able to help, and yeah, I think when I was growing up, we were led to believe that we were deficient, and that's just not the case. We are not deficient, we're just different. And I think work your plan around the ability rather than what you think the ability should be. Ooh. That would be my word of advice. And I think you'll find a lot more wins than losses.
I'm writing that down too, Jaxon. That's beautiful. We have one comment, which is, well, we have lots of comments. There are so many thank yous in the chat. People are just so blown away with your transparency and the gift that is you sharing your story. One of the comments is, thank you so very much, Jaxon, for sharing your journey. Your path is impressive, and I am grateful to hear from your heart. All the best to you, you know, and that's the consensus from everybody. I can't believe that this has been an hour. I do hope that at some other time you would be kind enough and open enough to rejoin us.
I'm always here.
It's been an absolute delight to talk to you, Jaxon. We've learned so much from you, and my deepest thanks for you taking the time to share with us. So thank you all so much for being part of today's crucial conversation about cognitive diversity, navigating life while being neurodiverse. It has been a pleasure helping you find answers to your questions. I hope you are now inspired to use the recommendations from Jaxon. If they make a difference for you and your family, please email me and share. Our email is crucialconversations@2ecenter.org. So you'll shortly see a survey pop up on your screen. If you could complete it, I would be very grateful, or we would be very grateful. Your input about the conversations you would like to have in the future is vital for keeping this webcast valuable to you. We will resume our crucial conversations on February 16th. My guest then will be Debbie Reber, the founder of Tilt Parenting. So make sure that you join me.